Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. I recently got an apple-shaped jar mould, which I absolutely love, and as we're reaching the end of the academic year, I thought it would be perfect for making apple-scented candles in apple-shaped jars. So that's what I will be doing today. I will be using Aqua Cast because that's safe for candle vessels. But most importantly, I will be showing you a couple of adaptations I needed to make because this mould is designed to be used with epoxy resin, not water-based eco resin. So yeah, there are a couple of changes you will need to make if you want to use this mould with eco resin. So that's very important. So watch this if you want to have a go at that. If all that sounds interesting, stay tuned and enjoy the video. Right, before we begin, I thought it would be good to just go back in time to have a look at when I demoulded my epoxy resin apple. When you use epoxy resin and demould it, it will still be a little bit bendy, so you can reshape it however much you want to. So it doesn't matter if your mould isn't positioned perfectly in a round kind of shape as the resin is curing. So if it's a bit distorted, it doesn't matter. And that brings us on to today's issue. Today I'm using Aqua Cast, which obviously is going to cure solid. There won't be any bending it around afterwards if it's not in a perfect round shape. So the first adaptation I needed to make was to make a support to go on the inside of my mould to keep it perfectly round while the Aqua Cast is curing. And for that I'm using a strong paper coffee cup, and I just needed to cut it to size with a bit of trial and error until I got it so that it would fit snugly. And that really helped it to keep a nice circular shape. So that's the first problem avoided, but now we're on to a slightly trickier problem. If you look at the mould for the lid, you'll see that there's quite a small hole there in the middle of the mould for the stalk of the apple. And the problem is the end of the stalk is bigger than the hole in the mould. So if you're using epoxy resin, it's fine, it's very strong, you can give it a good tug to get it out. But with casting compounds like Aqua Cast or any other water-based casting compound, it's not so strong when it's poured in such a thin amount because that stalk is quite thin. And if you're going to put it into under the pressure that it needs when you're pulling it out, so it needs some support. So what you've just seen me doing is just putting like a circle on the end of a piece of wire so that it really locks into the Aqua Cast when it's, when that's inside the Aqua Cast, and then making a circle on the other end, and that will lock into the other end. So hopefully my thoughts were that would help the stalk to stay connected when I demould the lid. I hope I explained that well enough. I actually needed to make another one after I've just shown you that. The wire wasn't quite long enough. I wanted it to be just a bit longer, so I quickly made another one. But anyway, there's one more thing I need to mention. If you have a go at this and your stalk breaks as you demould it, it's not a problem. I'm going to show you how you can really easily fix it as though you would never know it had ever broken. So yeah, honestly, it doesn't matter. Even with the wire still in there, it could still break. But the main thing is that it's connected to the lid. Even if it breaks, you'll still be able to pull it out. However, and I've learned the hard way, if you didn't use the wire and you pulled your lid out and the stalk broke, it would be stuck in the end of that mould. And trust me, It's very hard to get the broken stalk out of the mould so that you can glue it back onto your lid and fix it like I'm going to show you soon. It's very hard, and I actually damaged my mould trying. So yeah, that's the main reason actually for putting the wire in. I didn't mind too much if it broke because I know how to easily fix it, and I'm going to show you that soon. Right, with that done, it was time to add a little bit of colour to the stalk. I'm using some brown mica powder and I'm just applying it with a brush, and it clings to the silicone. I find that the Aqua Cast sticks quite well to the pigment powder and, lifts it off the mould fairly well. But if it doesn't, it's not a problem either, because you can paint it later on, and I'll be doing a little bit of that in this video. Right, now it's time to mix up the Aqua Cast. I'll put the measurements I used on the screen because right at this moment I can't remember what measurements I used. But what I do know is I added 50 grams extra of powder after I'd worked out how much I needed. There's an online calculator on the Elichem website to work out how much Aqua Cast powder and how much water you need. But the great thing about Aqua Cast is if you want to make it thicker, to make it stronger, or thinner to fill in, fine details on moulds, you can do that. It's not a problem because all the important stuff is fused into the powder. So by adding more or less, it doesn't matter. So yeah, I added more because I thought making the Aqua Cast solution a bit thicker and stronger will make it a little bit more likely for that stalk not to break when it comes to demoulding. So once I'd measured the powder into the water, I gave it all a really good stir until it was lump free, and then it was time to add the pigment. I decided on a mixture of two greens. I've got Vivid Green and Avo, and they're from Homeware Design Co. I will leave a link and discount code in the video description. And so I'm just adding a bit of each, giving it a good stir until I'm happy with the colour. Try not to add too much at once. I added quite a lot there. I was being a little bit too brave. Add a little bit at a time until you're happy with it is my best advice. Do as I say, not as I do, eh? So once I started adding the vivid green, it really did start to transform it and bring it up to like a Granny Smith kind of colour. The great thing about making apples is there's such a variety of apples, isn't there? There's so many different colours. So as long as you make it green, or red even, or even a greeny yellow, you can't go wrong because you get apples in all those colours. But I was going for the Granny Smith kind of green. Okay, it's time to fill the moulds. Now, the body of the apple is easy, no problems at all. It's the lid that takes the most care and attention. Firstly, because of the stalk, and secondly, because of the kind of lip in the mould that comes over the top. You will get air bubbles trapped in there if you're not careful. So anyway, back to the stalk. I'm just adding a little bit, and what I want to do is let it run down one side of the hole. I didn't want to block the hole because if you block it, the air can't get out and then the Aqua Cast won't get in. So I was trying to ease it down there whilst keeping an air hole so that the Aqua Cast can replace the air. So if that makes sense, I'm sure it does. Anyway, I did it very gradually and it took me a little while. I've got my little micro brush there. I'm squeezing it from the bottom as well to really help it to make sure it's in there. And like I said a couple of times, I'm really taking lots of time on that. Do be careful though not to scratch off the colour that you've put, previously onto the mould. Right, once I was happy that the stalk was filled nicely and I'd given it a good squeeze so there was no air trapped in there, I added the metal splint that I made earlier on and then continued to fill up the lid. And the good thing about this mould is you can see through it. So if you look around the edges at the top, you will see if there are any pockets of air trapped under that rim of the mould. And if there are any, just go around with your micro brush and try to tease them out. The thing is, the air will continue to rise to the top for a few minutes, so you will need to come back and keep checking it. And the reason this is important is because if you leave a big air pocket in there, there will be a hole around the edge of your lid, and you don't want that. So just take plenty of time on this until you're happy that there's no air pockets or air bubbles trapped in there. So do you remember at the beginning when I used my coffee cup to make a support for the inside of the body of the mould? I also cut down a plant pot to make sure that the lid of the mould kept nice and round. But in the end, I decided not to use it. I'm only explaining about it now because it's in the video and you would be wondering what was going on if I didn't explain. I found that it just made it just kind of stopped it from being flat. And I thought, if I leave it in this support, it's going to be wonky. And so it quickly came out of the support when I realised. So ignore this bit. You don't need a support for the lid. The lid was absolutely fine as it was. So next it was time for the other part, the jar part of the mould, and that's very easy. All you have to do is pour in about halfway and then give it a good squeeze around the bottom, which will be the top, just to make sure. Just as usual, I get fed up of saying bubbles. You must get fed up of hearing me talk about bubbles and air pockets. Anyway, give it a good squeeze so that there's no bubbles or air pockets stuck in the bottom. And it's a really easy mould for doing that because you can get your hand inside it and squeeze easily. Because I haven't put the support in yet, do that afterwards. So yeah, that's really easy. Once you've squeezed around the bottom, you just fill it up and it's done. Once it's full, do have a look around the sides. As I said before, you can see through it and you can see the air bubbles. If there are any, give it a good tap or even like a stroke upwards, and it tends to agitate them enough to make them rise to the top. And this is where I decided I didn't want the support for the lid, and I took it out without too much mess, thankfully. So Aqua Cast is generally ready for demould after about an hour, but it's not fully cured until 12 hours later. And so I was thinking to myself, if I can leave it as long as possible, it will get even stronger whilst it's in the mould and reduce the chances of that stalk breaking. So I left it actually for about 6 hours. So here I'm just releasing the mould around the edges very carefully, first of all, before I attempt to get the stalk part out. And I've got to tell you, I was quite nervous because I'd already had 2 failed attempts at this. Right, what I found was, if you turn it over and remove the mould from the lid instead of removing the lid from the mould, you get a much better control over it. You can put your fingers on the inside of the mould and then pull it upwards nice and firmly and quickly in a vertical motion. Don't wiggle it around trying to do it gently, that's when you'll snap it. And yeah, this was my first success. I say that, the other 2 that I did, you're going to see soon, they're brilliant as well because I fixed the stalk. So they were a success, and it's really easy to fix the stalk if it breaks. And I'm going to show you that now. Right, so stepping back in time, this is one of my previous ones which did break, but it came out of the mould absolutely fine because it had one of the metal supports in. I think I just wiggled it around too much when I was demoulding it and it broke. So I need to fix that. Now, if it was 2 clean pieces, I would glue it together with E6000 plus glue, first of all, and that would work good. And that you know, that's the first step. But I can't do that with this one because it's still attached together with the wire and I wouldn't be able to get the glue into the crack. So I'm just using UV resin all over the stalk. I'm coating it and then curing it. And then you can repeat the process if you want to make it even stronger. And that works so easily and so well, you wouldn't know it had ever been broken. With mine, I decided I was going to brush on some more of the brown pigment powder after curing it whilst it was still a little bit tacky, just to give it a little bit more colour, and then give it another coat on top of that to protect it. So because I was going to be adding some more powder, I decided to do a few lines going outwards to get a bit more of a pronounced detail on the top of the apple. So that's what I'm doing here. Whilst I've got that UV resin out, I thought I'd just spread it about a bit before curing it. So after 2 minutes of curing, I was able to add my pigment powder, which I will quickly show you. In actual fact, it's funny the way things work, it really is. I didn't like it. It covered the break beautifully, and like I said, you wouldn't know it had ever been broken when it was finished, but I didn't like the colour. It was just too dark and too different to the apple, and this one I ended up painting, and it was probably one of my favourite ones in the end, painting over it. So yeah, it's like these things happen for a reason, don't they? I'm so glad that that stalk broke and I had to fix it, and then I messed it up and then I rectified it, because the whole process ended up being so good, and you will see this one finished soon. It's completely transformed, and the UV resin which I put on, you know, the detail that I'm going over now, that made a lovely textured effect, and so yeah, you'll see that later. So now you know how to fix it if the worst thing happens, and it's not a problem. Let's get back to the one I'm doing today. It's time to get this one out of the mould. And there we go. Isn't that a beautiful colour? I was really happy with it, and I knew that I really didn't need to change much about this one. My previous two I added paint to because I just wanted to. But this one, I love it just as it is, and the lid fits because it had that support keeping it nice and round. Right then, because I was happy with my jar just green, I decided to show you a little bit of the painting process on one of the others that I'd already painted off camera, because I knew that people would ask questions about how I got the effect on the other two apples, which I did first of all. So yeah, as you can see here, I already painted it and it looks really good. And there's the lid that you've just seen me fixing, and you can just about see the texture on there. And I was really pleased with this one. I thought it really looked like a real apple. So yeah, I've already painted it, but I'm adding some more. Here I've got some extender. It's acrylic extender. I'm trying to remember where it's from. I'll put it on the screen to tell you the make. I'm thinking it's a Jaquard one, and I'm mixing that with some red acrylic paint. I found that if I just used red, it was too bright, you know, to put on there straight away, and the apple just didn't look natural. I wanted it to be much paler, but I didn't want to dilute the colour with water. So I found in my stash of paints this extender, and I thought I would try it out, and it did work really well. It meant that I could build up the colour without it being too strong. So as you can see here, it's actually quite dark. If you want it lighter, just mix in more of the extender to lighten it a little bit. And I've got one of those brushes, I think they're called wisp brushes, and that works really well for getting that lined effect, which you sometimes do see in apples, and that's what I was trying to emulate here. So yeah, I was pleased with how that worked. I've used some red in this one, there's some green in there, I've put some yellow in, and so I ended up with quite a natural look. Right, we're back again to today's apple. We're going back and forth today, aren't we? So I decided I wasn't quite happy with the stalk. It needed some more brown and it hadn't picked up all of the pigment quite as well as I'd hoped it had. So yeah, I've just taken some brown acrylic paint this time and I'm painting the stalk. I'm using a bit of the extender again that I used just now, and that just helps you to build up the colour rather than just making it too dark straight away, because you can't take it off once it's on. And so yeah, it's just a case of building up the colour however you want it. And what I will do is fast forward through this because I spent quite a long time faffing around with it. Okay, are you ready for a transformation? This is one of my favourite bits, putting on the wax. Just you wait to see how it transforms it. I'm using Clark's wax for stone and concrete, and as you can see from the almost empty jar, I use it a lot because I love it and it smells wonderful too. It smells of oranges. Now look at that going on. I'm just rubbing it on with a microfiber cloth in a circular motion, and look how it brings out the colour in the apple. I think it's just wonderful. I love that colour as well. It's so apple coloured, isn't it? Yeah, so those two pigments I used did work really well to create an apple colour. And then, of course, I did the same on the lid. And you can see the difference even better on the lid. Look at that. Look at it coming to life. Wow. Yeah, so I was very, very happy with this apple. It looked very simple, very green, and very much like an apple. But my two favourites are probably the ones that went wrong that I did before showing you this one. So it's fine, isn't it? Sometimes you make mistakes, but it doesn't matter because you can make it even better because of the mistake. So my 3 apples are now ready. I will be keeping one of them because one of the ones was the one where the lid didn't fit properly because it was before I'd worked out I needed a support for the mould. Yeah, it was part of the learning process. You might be able to tell actually, the one on the right is a bit distorted. So yeah, it's time to make them into candles, and I'm using wooden wicks. I just love wooden wicks, and I'm just going to be using hot melt glue gun just to glue the wick support into position. Next, I melted my candle wax and added some spiced apple fragrance. I've used beeswax and soy wax mixed together. I actually wanted to just use soy wax. I wanted the inside of the apple to look like the inside of an apple and be white, but I didn't have enough, so I had to mix it with beeswax. So we've got kind of a yellow inside to the apple, but never mind. They still look good and they smell just like apples. I think it's so good to have the candle looking like what it smells like. So yeah, I've got my silicone jugs there. I find that silicone jugs work really well for candle wax because it's easy to clean them up afterwards. And when the wax was cured, I trimmed the wicks to 5mm with my wick trimmers and my candles were ready. And here they are, all ready, and I'm going to light the one that I'm keeping, and then I've got 2 left, which is very handy because I found out that my granddaughter actually has 2 teachers. So yeah, everything happens for a reason, doesn't it? I had a candle for each of her teachers. So let's have a listen to the sound you get from the wooden wicks. They're great. My husband hates the sound of those crackling candles, which is unfortunate because I make quite a lot of them. But yeah, I like them. It's quite relaxing listening to it crackling away. But you always get someone who thinks the house is burning down when they hear the crackling, don't you? So we've come to the end of another video, and it's been quite a journey, this one, hasn't it? I really didn't intend the video to be as long as this, but I really wanted to show you the adaptations you would need to make to use this mould with an eco resin, because I think it works so much better actually. I was going to say so well, but actually it's better. I prefer it with eco resin than I do with epoxy resin. They just look so lifelike, don't they? And so it would have been a shame if you'd have tried to do this and not known what you know now, because you would have made the same mistakes as me. And now you don't have to, do you? So that's good. I hope to see lots of Aqua Cast apples on the internet very soon. And don't forget, if you want to show me what you've made, just follow me on Instagram and tag me, and I'll be able to go along and have a look at what you've made. So that's it for now. I will see you again next time. Give it a thumbs up, please, if you've enjoyed it. And yeah, thank you for watching, and bye for now.